Welcome to the Emirates Airline Festival of Literature. Thank you so much for coming out here tonight. This session is called Identity Poetics. It is a panel conversation about poetry. So if you came here to listen to some international poets talking about poetry, you're in the right place. But if you stumbled here by accident, I hope you decide to stay and explore this world of poetry. My name is Jamil Adas. I am the founder of a poetry initiative called the Poetry Hood. We do everything related to poetry, from poetry publication online to poetry events, workshops, poetry podcast, and poetry film production. I'm also your moderator for tonight's talk. And joining me on the talk are three amazing poets and performers and writers, starting with Carlos Andrés Gómez, who is a Colombian American coming all the way from New York to be with us here. And he is a two-time International Poetry Slam champion. His work explores themes of masculinity, displacement, race, gender, and violence in the most tender of ways. His poetry book, Ejito, is available for sale here at the festival. I highly recommend you go and grab a copy. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Carlos.
Thank you, Jamil. So, the book's actually sold out. I'm sorry. But if you got a copy, I'll sign it. And my publisher is doing 10% off and no shipping costs. So if you order it, I will sign a bookmark that you can put in it later. Give it up for Jamil again. Thank you, Jamil. Thank you for being here. If you're grateful to be alive, make some noise. If you're grateful to be alive, make some noise. This is a poem I wrote. I think is it fair to say right now is a pretty terrifying time to be alive on planet Earth? A lot more for some people than others, right? And so I wrote this poem as kind of a love letter to gratitude, to remind me even in the moments when it's very hard for me to remember to hold on to or at least look toward gratitude. And this is called Praise. And I'm sure Afra will say this, but yeah, if you hear something that moves you, that you feel, in your gut, in your torso, you can snap your fingers. Yes, thank you, Shahid. Yes. What's that? Yeah, even if you don't like it, just snap your fingers. That's a really beautiful way. And even something simple, just like smiling and nodding, you know what I mean, feeds all of this, absolutely. So praise. 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 Because my grandmother's final days lasted 23 years. And so we'd rush each time. Say goodbye and goodbye. Te quiero mucho, abuelita. Te adoro. Because my mother's truest mother is grief, who taught her the slack-jawed abandon of joy. Because my daughter strung together a 4-syllable word this afternoon. Because I say I love you so much to my wife mid-fight. And we chuckle sometimes between barbs like we forgot which characters we were supposed to play because I was given a best friend for all of 6 years. And we handwrote letters each week in bright ink, dreamed of whose hair would give way first. Because the dust gave me a reprieve from the storm on the way home from daycare today. Because the rain is a stubborn guard when I am most tired. And grace refuses the chariots, also known as that rickety stroller that has somehow not yet quit. Because Brent metamorphoses those ticking minutes everyone else loses sleep over, shows up an hour early, or makes me wait while I reread the menu I've had memorized for a decade. Because we pretend we don't know what we'll order, ask each other, then get the chicken pad thai every darn time. Because my sister and brother were once small enough to make a home of my curled arm. Because I loathed their arrival until that moment on the 7th floor of Mount Sinai, because there are no half-siblings. because my body begins to fail a little more each morning in minute and quiet increments, like gradual, gorgeous rust, because only survival gives us those letdowns that remind a persistent marvel it is still here, because I courted death too long, but now dream of my retirement porch, because my son's scalp at 76 seconds old, the 3 weeks he barely slept for more than 15 minutes, the lunges that shaped my quads and calmed his sobbing just long enough because I have wanted to be a father as long as I have feared its weight, because I exhale knowing I cannot fail what I cannot leave, because no one I know has grown more in 3 decades than my father. Because right now, the oven is performing its miracles. February is teasing us with its fickle weather. My daughter is coloring in vibrant looping scrawls that look like cartoon fireworks, or the curls wreathing the large eyes she's borrowed from her mother. And finally, I'm home.
Thank you so much, Carlos. Next up is Afra Atiq. She is an Emirati award-winning international poet. She has a master's degree in diplomacy and has been featured as a performer and speaker on multiple platforms, some of which, very impressively, the Louvre in Abu Dhabi and Dubai Opera. Please, round of applause for Afra.
مساء الخير. Annabelle, your Arabic's getting better. So, big thank you to Jamil, and a big thank you to Carlos and everybody else that's here, my people that are all sitting here. So I kind of had this idea of what I was going to do, and then I miraculously wrote a poem. And Carlos was staring at me for 25 minutes while he refused to talk to me until I finished the poem. So I finished the poem. So I'm going to share it with you today. It's brand new. It's not been heard before. So this is your first preview of this poem. Again, if you hear something you like, snap. If you hear something you love, snap, clap, make noise. Let me know that I'm not being boring. And okay, let's get to it. Ready? Energy. Eddie, you ready? Okay. Bismillah. I was raised never to yell, told never to shout unless I absolutely have to, but how do you even say things without yelling? Poetry circuits tell us we need to scream at slams, trying to get my voice across oceans of people. 3 minutes, start the clock 3 minutes, to make you care about something, to make you feel something. 2 minutes and a half. I told my life story and still nobody is listening. So I yell. It goes against everything I was taught. My bones know I am not supposed to be yelling, never yell, unless you absolutely have to, bearing the wounds of generations and generations passed down like hand-me-down clothes, battle scars of being told to sit down, be quiet, be still, be silent, be unnoticed, speak only when spoken to, speak only long enough to still be considered pretty. I must be loud. I need my voice to carry, be the loudest in the room, because being loud means you're being heard. Remember your words, Afra. Remember being 1 year old, sitting on the living room floor in our house, discovering the 1980s Webster's Dictionary. Remember your words, Afra. Ambidextrous, discombobulated, pasta. Hurry up, Afra. Use your words, Afra. 2 minutes and a half, and for the first time in my life, I am speechless. Forgetting the words that form in crevices of my vocabulary, I must be heard. Words perched in my throat, clearly not cooperating, even though I asked them politely, please, 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 please don't fail me now. Okay, it was more like begging. I must be heard, and to be heard, I must be loud, carrying a community between my shoulder blades, because what are words if they're not responsible? ليش رسمية عفرة? Be responsible عفرة, not like that other time when you weren't, that other time when they told you you were other. Another angry Arab woman subject to Orientalist interpretations. Be loud. Be anything other than other, loud enough to tell them this isn't how the story goes, but you're woke now, Afra. Stories are now called narratives. The world is riddled with insecurities and optimism in equal measure. Narratives and counter-narratives, noise coming at you from all angles like algebra and geometry formed an alliance and they're marching towards you on the battlefield. You are the target. This is the stuff of nightmares. Just look at her. Look at her. She's just a spoken word poet. You know, she's not the first one to do this. She's just the first girl to do this. She's just the performance, just the entertainment, just rewriting rhyming words. Use your words, Afra. Ambidextrous, discombobulated, cheeseburger. No, this is the remix, a reminder that I can take your J-U-S-T 4-letter word and give it new context. 2 minutes left. Turn the she's just a spoken word poet into the post-apocalyptic way of the future. Poet and scholar equal measures of poetry and PhD paper to voice vocally verbalizing verbs in my vernacular, which is particularly perplexing to the parts of people who try to pacify the paint of spoken word poets, packing them into parcels and padlocking them shut. Just a spoken word poet. I'll take your just. I'll see your just, and I'll raise you the stakes in language, in lugha, in la langue. Just from justice, from justia, equal to equality, to fairness, voice, to poems, to speak. من العدالة للعدل، من اللغة للمشاعر، للشعر، للقصة إلى قمة مقاومة القصيدة التقليدية. I'll take your, it's not poetry, you're not a literature major, do you even know the mechanics of poetry? I'll take your, maybe next slam you'll actually win. And I will yell. I will yell until my voice bends time and space. 1 minute left. I will walk into classrooms and I will tell the kids to sing like nobody is listening, to love like nobody is hurting, to speak like everyone is listening, speak like everyone is listening, speak like everyone is listening, from mountaintops and valleys to places you've never heard of. Shout it from the rooftops like they don't know how your words will turn out, but somehow, someway, they do. 30 seconds left. Feel your voice. Raise from your lungs like a patriot to an anthem. Truth spoken through marble staircase spines. Flex your vocal cords. Time. 3 minutes. Remember your words, Afra. Discombobulated, ambidextrous. Pizza, use your words, Afra. Ambidextrous, discombobulated. Always, like everybody is listening. Thank you.
Wow. Amazing. Thank you so much, Afra. Our third speaker is Farah Chamma, who is a Palestinian international writer and performer. She has recently completed her Masters of Arts in Performance and Culture at Goldsmiths University in London. Congratulations, Farah, and please put your hands together for Farah.
مرحبا. Okay, I'm back here now. I actually used the Emirates Airlines flight to move back here because I was too broke. And I plan to start working again to make money, and somehow touching upon Afra's poem, to be more than just a spoken word poet, right? To have a career. And I'm always afraid of working because I always feel that a working space has tension. And a couple of years ago, when I was working, there was a clash with a colleague, and I remember I felt horrible. And I wrote this little thing to myself that I repeat over and over and over. How to always be nice. Stare into walls, lots of them. Look up if you may, look away. Some faces only bring out the ugly in you. So look away. Sadness is gentler than anger, and the world is no piñata. Sweet things do not come after a good beating. And the world is no piñata. Sweet things do not come after a good beating. Let your eyes speak for you, because you are kinder than all this. You are kinder than all this, and soon you'll be able to turn all bad incidents into stories you tell your loved ones. Into funny stories you tell your loved ones. And you will laugh and laugh. Oh boy, you will laugh until it's too good to be as ugly. خلاص خلصت.
Can Carlos and Afra please join
Woo!
us for the talk?
No, wherever you prefer.
Thank you so much, guys, for joining us. It's truly an honor to be sitting here with some amazing poets, performers, and writers. And you know, when I was preparing for this talk, I've seen you all perform live before, and I've seen you perform on my laptop screen a lot of times before. And one thing that always crosses my mind when I'm thinking about poetry, and I'm pretty sure I'm not the only one here, is the word vulnerability. I mean, when you're standing there on stage, and like, if I was to quote Afra, I heard you once say that performing poetry on stage is like exposing your neck to a group of people wielding swords.
Multiple swords, yes.
Yeah. So I was wondering, from where do you harness this composure amidst this huge wave of vulnerability? We can start with Carlos and move our way down like that, or free-flowing discussion.
Yeah, well, I had this this acting teacher I worked with for many years, and he would say, you know, people think that the idea of what you're risking as an artist is actually kind of inverted or confused. He said, you know, to risk anything less than everything is to assure that you will lose it all. And so his whole point was basically, if you're going to commit, you have to do it fully. And in my experience, the more vulnerable I can be in front of strangers who might feel like they're wielding swords, I can only expect that kind of vulnerability from them if I show it first. And so I'm hoping to give the audience members permission to go somewhere that if I don't show it to them, I actually don't know if it's reasonable for me to expect them to also go there, since I'm the one on stage. So that's usually a guiding principle that I kind of move from.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is trusting your truth, as cliche as it sounds, and it's understanding the validity of your craft and the validity of your words, and showing that to people. And I think for me, you know, I always say this, that every time I'm on stage, every time I'm in front of a crowd, it's a responsibility, and it's not one that I take lightly. And I feel like as a performer, you have a responsibility to your audience to show them that, to really engage with them in that way. And if you're not being genuine, the audience can tell. And I think as an artist, you have to also respect the audience who have taken their time and their effort to come and see you, because they see something and they relate to you in a certain way. And I think it is, you know, go big or go home, and leave it all on the stage, because if we're not sitting here speaking our truths, then what are we doing?
Beautiful.
Yeah. I mean, you assume that we keep our composure. That's an assumption.
That's true.
I think when I speak to students sometimes in schools, I usually say it's okay to break down. Why not? We live in societies that tame us constantly. We have to be a certain way everywhere. We have to dress up a certain way everywhere. And the theater gives the space, gives us a space, a temporary space, to just go a little more crazy, to break down if we want, to try as much as we can to push the norms. And I think it's about playing with composure and the antonym of composure, which I don't know right now.
Not composure.
Not composure.
Non-composure.
Right? And it's about not worrying to look a little silly, not worrying to make mistakes, and just treating text like a conversation. And especially if there's an audience. You are speaking, and it doesn't matter if you mess up. And it just makes it more genuine and makes it more of a conversation than a very prepared presentation. Yeah,
Yeah.
It's less scripted, and I think it's about acknowledging this and playing with that.
Absolutely. I'd imagine also with the practice, the stage becomes your home in some way. I'd like to hear your thoughts on what do you think there's a moment in your life where you felt like the stage became your home, or was it right from the get-go?
It was definitely right from the get-go. I think there's a love of the stage and a love of being with the audience and engaging with the audience. It does feel like home because sometimes you love it, sometimes you hate it, but you know that you can always go back. You know what I mean, right? Yeah. But you know that you can always go back. It's like it's a soft place to land. You can know that you can experiment with other art forms. You can try different things. But the beauty of the stage is that it's yours, and you know whatever it is that happens, you can always go back. And I was having this conversation yesterday with someone, and I was saying that as a poet, I always have this driving force to give my best to the audience. So regardless of what is going on in my life, regardless of what is happening, regardless of however much my day has been completely draining or it's just been the worst day ever, I know that the moment I get on that stage, nothing matters. Mm-hmm. Nothing matters but me delivering my best to the audience who are deserving of my best. And so I never want to become that person that just thinks about it as, okay, yeah, it's just the stage, it's great. No, it's a huge part of who I am, and I feel like it's a huge responsibility in that respect.
Have you ever shared with the audience?
Have I shared with the
audience? If you had like a draining day, would you share that?
I do, but I also, I have my set list of poems, and I have the things that I do, and I know that I'm not going to drag my bad day to the audience. I love and respect the audience too much for that.
Yeah. I'd like to hear about a moment that you thought, where you stood there and thought, this is exactly why I do what I do. This is, like a moment where you saw something happen and you said, my work is encapsulated in this moment right here. I mean, if it has
I've
never
heard of
happened
this
before.
moment.
Well, I don't know. I can share something.
Yeah, please go ahead.
I was once in Amman, in Jordan, after a long time of not having been there, due to visa issues, of course. And I remember we were at a little cafe, and we had a poetry. I had a poetry event with a musician, and at some point we start singing an Kulthum song. It's part of a poem that I often do. يلا نعيش في عيون الليل. And the whole audience sang the song. And an Kulthum song is a very long song. And they sang around 10 minutes of the song. 50 people just sang it. And at this moment, I felt two things. I felt that I want to write more Arabic content, because at that moment, this is exactly what I felt. I felt that this feels so right. It's this sultani, you know. It was a moment of sultani. It was a moment of, I don't know, muse, let's say, singing a specific song. And I also knew that this effect, when people feel it so much that they want to sing along voluntarily, is exactly why we do, why I do this, why we do this probably, because this is what it's about. It's just about sharing content, but also making it feel very accessible. You know? So, yeah.
I know for me, there was a moment I had a decade ago now, 10 years ago, and I was in Germany at a literature festival in Berlin, and at the time my little sister was 13, and she had recently been diagnosed with dyslexia and had been struggling very much in school, and I'd written a poem that she did not know about. Mm-hmm. And she was sitting in the front row in this smoky cafe in East Berlin, and I was closing the night, and the last poem I did was the poem in honor of my little sister's brilliance, not in spite of her dyslexia, but because of her dyslexia. And in Germany, when they appreciate a performance, they throw roses on the stage. Oh. And so there was this moment at the end of the poem where there's like that sort of that pregnant, pronounced silence at the end of the last breath. And it's complete silence. And I remember just hearing all the roses, and they covered the entire stage. And I picked one up and I kneeled down and I handed it to her, and we just cried and hugged. And I feel like it was one of those moments that I think, in the moment before I die, if there's one image that flashes, it'll probably be me picking up that rose, looking my little sister Maita in the face and handing it to her. And then I'll be good.
Wow.
I think so that the significant moments that you have as a poet are not really moments about you. They're often moments, like Farah was saying, about the crowd or about Carlos's sister. And I remember this was a while back, and I had gone to a school to do, as I do, to do a workshop and to do poetry. And I get back home and I get this weird, direct message on Instagram, and it's not someone that I know, and it's not someone that I have mutual friends with, and I'm thinking, okay, this is kind of creepy, but let's see where this goes. And so I think it was a few days after I'd done the school talk, and I open it, and it's this message from the mother of one of the students that was at the school.
Wow.
And she says, you don't know me, you did a talk in my daughter's school, and I just want to thank you for what you did. And so she tells me, her daughter was struggling, and I have a poem about, living on the fringes and being bullied. And I did that poem, and I wasn't going to do it at the school, but they had requested it. And she said, that poem helped her, and now she's writing, and now I can see a change. And she's not struggling as much, and it was just so amazing for someone else's mother to tell you that you've changed the life of their child, that you've had that kind of impact. And I feel like that's what this is about at the end of the day. It's not about the stages, it's not about where you've been, it's not about however many, standing ovations you've gotten. It's about those moments. I was in Jaipur, at the Jaipur Literature Festival, and this man comes up to me with his young daughters, and he says, thank you. And I say, you're welcome, okay. I'm going, and this is after after people had left the poetry hall, so I didn't really know what was going on. And he says, I'm so happy that you do what you do, and I'm so proud that I was here with my daughters, because I struggle to find good, powerful female role models for them. Mm-hmm. And he's like, I hope that you stay this person for my daughters. And so I feel like often it's about those moments, those one-offs, the people singing, the roses, the lives that you change. And I think all of us here are fortunate enough to be in a career where we can actually go to bed at night thinking we've made a difference in someone's life.
Absolutely.
And I think ultimately that's what this is about.
I think it plays a lot with what you were saying about responsibility. It truly, you start seeing the responsibility as more of these experiences come up. All right, so we've been to a lot of poetry events, and you guys have been to a lot of poetry events around the world. I was wondering, well, sometimes I would see the poetry spirit and the spoken word spirit in the air when I walk into an event. And other times, perhaps, you would come in and perform and do your thing as a performer and just leave. And that's what the event ends up being, just that. You came and performed and you left. I want to know if you see certain elements in an event that makes you feel that spirit in the air.
It's the crowd. I think it's always the crowd.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Because going into an event, you don't know how it's going to be. You don't know how the audience is going to be. But as soon as you walk in there and as soon as you sense the energy in the room, you know. You know this is going to be a good crowd. You know that these people are going to be amazing, and you know that it's going to be an experience that's going to stay with you. And I think when doing what we do as performers, you feed off of the energy that you get from the crowd. And so you know when immediately when we walk in. We walked into this room today and Carlos goes, yes, this is going to be a good crowd.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
I even changed the poem. I changed my poem, yeah. I honestly, I told Afra, I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to do something different now. You know, I mean, I couldn't agree with that more. I mean, I'm used to New York, you know, grew up going to the New York Poets Cafe, and the fire code, so like the limit of people that are allowed to be in there is 148 people. And on any Friday night, I guess maybe don't record this so they don't get shut down, they'll put like 350 people in there, which is like more than double what's legally allowed in the space. And so the stage is probably what, like the size of this?
It's like the size of this box.
Yeah, and it's so difficult to get up to the stage. I mean, there are people sitting on the floor, sitting on the walls, and so it's just like performing inside of a sardine can, you know. And
that's exactly what.
Right, and so I think, it's sweaty and it's hot and it's just
it's loud,
so I think and it's
sometimes
loud,
it smells.
and so I think it's one of those things too. Like even when I walked in here, you're a very present and a very effusive room of people, and I think we all felt that definitely, and I think and I would say too, that's something that the energy of a festival can bring. But it's also a host, you know? It's also a person who sets the space and says, please, come on this journey with us. And everyone says, oh, okay.
So good job, Jamil.
Yeah, I mean, that answer plays very well with what Farah was saying earlier about how they started singing Kulthum with her. I mean, it takes a special crowd to do that. All right, I also was, about the responsibility aspect of it.
You look at me like I'm a responsible poet. Yes.
I think there are some steps that we can take as a community to breed more superstar poets, performers, and writers such as yourselves. And what steps do you think work? What other steps that perhaps we might not be doing, could we be doing in our community, as a collective, as a nation, as a government, so on and so forth?
I think the basis of all of this is community, and it's a sense of community. And so it's not just about the poets, it's about their access to, people's access to poetry. It's about librarians, one of whom is sitting over there, she's a fabulous librarian, people in education, teachers, people who come to the poetry events, people who buy the books, people who consume the material, people who support poets, and it's really just about building that community, and that's where everything starts. I mean, there are technical aspects to it too. There's a lot of research and literature, but at the heart of all of this is building a community, a supportive community in which you can grow artists. And it's about having that community, but also having access to development tools. And so it's not just being, yay, everyone's gonna clap for me, I'm amazing, I'm on stage, but it's about having that drive to make your craft better, to experiment with music and theater and what else is, music and theater, that's where my mind goes.
I'm with it.
music, theater, writing,
It could be visual.
film, visuals, adding different things and growing it. And it's fine to look at somebody and say, this person is amazing, I want to be like that person. But it's even more important to look at a poet and say, okay, how do I become the best poet that I can be? And you don't have to, become a poet. You can be a poetry appreciator. I think without the people who appreciate poetry, none of us would be here anyways. So that's also important.
Absolutely.
That sense of community.
I mean, when I started, I'm just checking that. Yeah, when I started, I was in high school, and I started writing at the age of 12 in English class. I love English, so on. And I think it was 11th grade, so I was around, let's say, 14, 15. I discovered a group called the Poeticians, which is run by Hind Shufani, who was organizing a poetry event 2 days ago here at the Lit Fest. And I went there. I went to I just took my little poem and my whole family, of course, because that's how you start, Khalto, Mama, Baba, everyone. And I went there. And Hind told me, and Frank Dulligan is here. He's one of the poets that started with the Poeticians, and Mary, his wife, is here as well, and maybe some others.
Should I be concerned that they're not sitting together?
Why are you sitting together? Yeah, but we can talk about that after the panel discussion. Yeah, but and I remember going there and Hind Shufani telling me, Farah, this is an 18+ event. We have very political, strong content that you're 16, so on. But since you're here with your whole family, you can join, and that's my story. And I did join, and I never stopped, and I stayed with them, and I consider that I'm still with them till today. And Hind Shufani is always around. And then Zaina Hashim Beg started Punch, which was also at the Lit Fest. And I think it's about initiatives. And then there's the Poetry Hood, and this man right here who's constantly doing things. So there's education in poetry that's important, and to me it's not just poetry, it's expression. Express yourself. How can you express yourself and not be scared? And I think these are the main tools, and express yourself in whichever way you prefer, even if you want to be an introvert and not say anything, but know that you can do that. Very, intentionally, I don't want to write poetry, but it's a choice. And I think it's just important to teach that. And then, of course, having the initiatives to do that. Having people that say, okay, I'm done with being the one on stage, now I want to be the one giving the opportunity to 16-year-olds, and so on. And I think it's that. It's alternating between wanting to be the superstar, which is becoming less and less relevant to me, and as the three of us said, it's not that important that you're the superstar. It becomes boring. It becomes a bit boring how many followers you have. It's just, and it starts being about, okay, what am I planting? Which seed am I planting, and why, and then, and it's taking initiative. And I think this is what changes as you go. It starts off with the excitement of, yay, I'm here, and I'm writing, and I'm cool. And then it becomes more about, this is good. This is good stuff. This is making a lot of people do things. A lot of students express gratitude, and it's that. So, yeah.
But I think ultimately, it is so important to find a community of like-minded people. Carlos went to the New Eurekans. I went to Untitled Chapters. It's about finding like-minded people in a creative community that help you and support you in doing those creative endeavors. And so it's really about that sense of creative belonging, I would say, almost.
Like that.
Right?
Yeah.
There's a poem in there, right?
Yeah.
But it's so important, and I would say that a lot of people who are incredibly talented don't find that kind of community, and they just don't pursue it.
Yeah.
Right.
And so it's so important to have these communities, to have the New Eureka, to have Untitled chapters, and to have places where people can go. I mean, we have people in Untitled chapters that we met when they were, what, 12, 11, 15, you know, and now they've grown up with us and they've become poets in their own right. And so it's amazing to see what you started, and, you know, to quote Farah, what you planted and where it's going, with the intention of continuing that. And it's never been about, hey, let's get famous. Fame is nice, I'm not gonna lie. But it's about, what are you leaving behind, and what is your legacy, and what do you want people to say about you and your work in your absence? Are you gonna be that person that's just, I'm looking for my name in lights and I'm gonna be amazing and I want people to clap for me? Or are you gonna be the person who gets a room full of people to sing Kulthum with you? Which, I mean, it is a very, they just have really, really long songs. I mean, so the fact that people stuck with it, you know, or getting people
10 minutes, yeah.
Getting people to engage with you in that way, you know, the roses, which I think next time everybody should bring roses.
Let's start that everywhere.
Right? But also, what are you leaving behind? You know, it's about those moments. It's about people, mothers coming and telling you, thank you for helping my kid. It's about people saying, I didn't know, you know, I didn't know what I was feeling until you put it into a poem and I saw it and it changed my life. Or people, the best thing ever is people saying, I wasn't into poetry, but now I am. Right. So it's about that. What are you leaving behind? What is your legacy, and what are you doing for your community? Because nobody does anything alone. It's just, it is about community. What are you doing for that community, and how are you helping it grow?
Yeah, I think community is a big word in this topic. And actually, I wanted to dive a little bit into your thoughts, Carlos, about community. Since you've, you were deep in your community in New York, I was wondering if you could share a little bit about what goes on there.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I have that much to get. I mean, I don't want to just be redundant. I fully support everything they were saying. I think just the biggest thing for me was I was very lucky, you know, when I was coming up in the scene in New York. It's a very vibrant scene, and there were 3 separate poetry nights every week, and I think I went to all 3 nights almost every week for 10 years. And in that model, there were the elders in the scene, who were probably 10 years older than me. They would mentor us, and they would challenge us as much as they would support us. They would demand more from us as much as they would nurture us. And I think that balance is really powerful, because there will, you know, your mentors are not the people on YouTube trolling you. Those are not your mentors. Your mentors are not the people who think everything you do is brilliant. Those are not your mentors either. You know what I mean? And so I think the mentors are the people. I was lucky to have people, you know, like Patricia Smith and Rachel McKibbins and Mahogany Brown, and people who would just pull me aside and say, you know what, your poem ended on this word.
Is Patricia Smith Patti Smith?
No, Patti Smith and Patricia Smith are 2 different people. Love Patti Smith, love Patricia Smith. 2 icons in their own right. Patricia Smith is slightly less famous, but very famous to a certain group of poets. But yeah, no, I don't know Patti Smith personally, but Patricia Smith, I recommend checking out. But yeah, so I think just having people who really challenged me and held me accountable in the work and as a person, but also wouldn't let me fall. You know.
Yeah, I think these are areas that, at least as the Poetry Hood, I think we can do better, to be honest. More events. You're saying 3 times a week?
It was 3 separate venues, though.
All right.
3. So I mean, New York City's a lot of people.
Yeah.
So it'd be Bar 13 on Monday nights, the Bowery Poetry Club on Thursdays, and the New Eurekan was on Friday, or on Wednesday as well if you wanted to. But generally, so it was like Monday, Thursday, Friday.
يلا جميل اشتغل بسرعة.
I mean, shout out to all of them. That it takes a lot. Even if you're doing it on a weekly basis, it takes a lot of work.
And they were all packed every week, every event. It was an incredible time.
That's phenomenal.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, we have run out of time, but we're going to open the floor for the audience if they have any questions for the poets.
Hi, thank you all for the talk. It was really interesting. My question is, how does the poem start for each of you?
I mean, all things start with an idea, right? They start with a thought, with an idea from a conversation. This is why I always tell people to look for inspiration everywhere. It doesn't have to come from the same medium. Your poetry inspiration doesn't have to come from poetry. And so I think that's where it starts. I think you have to think about what it is that you want to be saying and what are the issues that you care about, and then often it comes from there. Mine always starts with a beat. I think I'm very musically minded. I like that, musically minded.
Yeah.
And I know how I want it to sound, and I know where I need it to go. And actually, when I was writing the poem that I did earlier, I told I think I told you. I said I have a beginning and I have an end and I have no middle. And he says, okay, you basically have the poem. And I said, no, I know how I want it to sound. And he says, then go and write it. And so that's where with me.
It's like stop talking to me.
He wouldn't talk to me.
I know we're in public. I'm not going to talk to you.
We were sitting across from each other, and he would not talk to me. And I go, Carlos.
That's a good
Carlos!
friend. That's a good friend.
He's just sitting there, and then he like orders, and he's just sitting there, and I'm writing the poem. Until I said, Carlos, I'm finished. I said, okay, now I'll talk to you. But I think often it starts, as all things do, with an idea, or just a broad sense of, this is what I want to talk about, this is what I care about.
Yeah, I think what Afra said makes a lot of sense. It's, if there's an idea, it will brew and something will come out. I usually like to be challenged by people. I write a lot of things to my mother. I direct them to her because she gets on my nerves. And I love her so much, but I think she also writes, so it's also, I mean, of course, parents are a huge factor in expression, and she writes, and the last poem I wrote her is called, for the Arabic speakers, مش راح أتزوج يما ومش راح أجيب ولاد. And I read it at the Desert Stanzas. And it translates to, I will not get married, ya mama, and I will not get kids. And I knew it would get on her nerves, and it would stimulate her to reply in a poem. And I sent it to her as a voice note, and there was a dabke element to it. You know, مش راح أتزوج يما, you know, and it's annoying, and because it's that idea, I want to tell her, here, take it, and شوف شو هتعملي. And I think I like that very much, and you do that to whatever challenges you. I think it's important, because especially when you start writing, you need to be challenged, and you don't have to be the wise poet all the time that has all the answers. I think it's okay to be questioning what's going on. And yeah, and it's the same. I mean, you know, and you spoke about Orientalism, you know, when you're invited to an event in Europe, for example, and you're seen as, oh, the Arab that will talk about the Oriental world, you know. And it's annoying, so you challenge that. You go like, hey, come on, you know, hold up. This is not what this is about. I'm gonna challenge you. I will come to your event, but I will write something to challenge how you see me. And I think it's that. It's what Afra did in her poem right now.
I think a lot of our work is responsive. It's responding to something else. So it's not. I think we have this idea of inspiration that just kind of falls into your lap, and it's just like, I'm here, write me, and I wish that was how it works, but that's not how it works. So, you know, I have been quoted saying I have to wait until something angers me enough to write a poem about it. And I think a lot of our work is responsive to situations or to things that we just come across, and things that bother us and things that we want to change. And I feel like we're ultimately writing the world that we want to see.
Yeah.
And a lot of the times, it's the response that you think of later. You know, you have a conversation and somebody says something, and you say the wrong thing, or you don't say anything at all, and you go home and you think about it, you go like, that is what I was supposed to say, why didn't I say that? So it's a lot of it is that kind of response.
I think my best poems emerge from an urgent ache, and it's the response for the 8,000 ignorant same question I've gotten from 8,000 people. And so this is my blanket response. Exactly. Or it's an urgent ache for a moment that I wish the whole world could see. Yeah. A moment of just breathtaking tenderness or beauty. It almost hurts that I can't capture this and share it with every person I meet. So I capture it in a poem, and then I share it like that.
Beautiful. We have
3, right? I saw 3. I'm really bad at math.
Yeah.
So I saw 3 when they could have in fact been 1 or 5.
I think that's eyesight. That's not math.
That's also math, yeah.
This is a question for the whole panel. And have you ever performed something and then regretted it?
I want to say no. I think I've not regretted performing, but I think I've regretted my choice of poems because you feel the energy of the room, but also you go in there with a set idea of, okay, I'm going to do this poem or I'm going to do that poem. And I've had times where I've done the poem and I don't feel like that was the right choice for that crowd.
I think, yeah, I've had bad events, like events that didn't feel very good, where I didn't feel very comfortable. But I don't think regret is something that is very constructive. So I think, if there's a bad incident, you will build on it and you will just see why it's bad, but yeah, and why it didn't work for you that night.
You'll definitely, I guess, second that. I definitely loathe dozens of poems I've written in my life, and I definitely had my feelings very badly hurt by making myself very vulnerable in rooms that didn't deserve it.
Yeah.
But I definitely don't regret any of that, because if I got more protective, then it would not allow like moments like this to happen. So I'd rather be hurt, and have really beautiful moments than be a really scared prison that doesn't live.
We have one more question there.
Wait.
Hello, I'm going to commit the cardinal sin because my question isn't really a question. It's an invitation to Carlos to come and live in the UAE. Because
I'd love to, yes. My answer is yes, let's do it. I don't want to leave. I don't want to leave.
Here, my kids' school, it's the kids who all 4 grandparents come from the same country that have the identity insecurities.
Wow. Yeah.
So I think you'd be more welcome.
But when he asks you, you say yes, and when I tell you, you're like, no, I have to think about it. Great, Carlos. Great.
Do we
It was
have
a day later. I was
question?
wondering.
We have a question over here at the front row. Second row, yeah.
It seems that all of you are speaking 2 languages, like Spanish, English, Arabic, English, maybe French, I just don't know. And do you like to write more in one language, or what you write in one language you cannot rewrite it or translate it in the other language, or?
I think I write in English, Arabic, and now in French. And I think that there are certain poems that I write that I know need to be in the one language. But I have a poem called Bint al-Nokhada about my grandfather, and I wrote that poem several times. I wrote it in English, and it was about his life. I wrote it after he died, and I wrote it in English, and it just wasn't, I knew that it wasn't finished, and I knew that it wasn't the poem I wanted. And so I wrote it in Arabic, and I knew that it wasn't the poem. And so I finally wrote it. A friend told me, Afra, you need to write it in English and Arabic in the same poem. And I said, why? And she said, because that's the language you used to speak to him. Wow. And so when I wrote the poem with the languages side by side, that was when I knew that the poem was done, and I finally grieved his death properly. So I think different languages have different meanings. I recently discovered that my stress language is French. If I get stressed up to a certain point, I go French. I don't know why. But there are just, I think creatively there are things that you just know are gonna be in that specific language, and so it's very fluid to switch between, I think.
I just second that.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, I think her answer is
That's funny that you mentioned that.
Good
I
job,
also
Afra.
have a poem about my grandfather that jumps between English and Arabic as well.
Was that how you
I
spoke to
relate.
him, though, in
Yes,
both languages?
yes.
Wow.
Yeah. Any more questions? Yeah,
There
we
was
have
one in the front that's.
And her.
Oh,
Yeah,
sure.
She's had her hand
waiting
up.
for a while. Yeah.
Hi. Speaking, I've been the whole festival has been raising questions about how you read, how you write, how you think, how you feel. You were talking about vulnerability earlier, and I'm just curious because I know Hemingway said you have to writing, like if you want to write, you just bleed on the page. I don't know in your case, maybe you're bleeding on the mic, but how has your poetry helped you find forgiveness? Not to victimize your experiences all the time, but in such cases when it was just pretty bad, has your poetry helped you forgive or find forgiveness?
I think it has. Like, I think poetry in itself, just as an art form, has that ability to help you heal. And so I have a poem that I wrote about being bullied in school. So I wrote this poem, way after my school days, and it was an incredible moment to take something that was so traumatic and so tragic and something that hurt me so much, and to turn it into a poem and to make it into something beautiful, into something that helps not only me, but helps other people. So I think it is, in and of itself, healing in that respect. And then the poem about my grandfather, it helped me grieve. So I think it does just the art of, I don't want to say bleeding, that sounds kind of, but there is definitely blood involved in poetry, because it comes from such a personal place. And it does help you just in and of itself.
Any other comments?
Yeah, I just say for me, yeah, I think to have to re-encounter grief or pain in a way that is inherently defamiliarized because I'm doing it through poetry, I think has always moved me toward catharsis. That doesn't mean it resolves it. It doesn't mean it absolves things. No. But it moves me toward catharsis. And I think that, I guess I'm drawn to this too. Like, I want hope, I want forgiveness, I want the nice TV movie with the cute ending, but, life is a lot messier and a lot more complex. But I will say that, like writing my memoir, which is a lot about my complicated relationship with my father, by the end, like as I handed in the galleys from that book, a huge weight was lifted off my relationship with my father. And I bought the engagement ring for my long-term girlfriend. So there was like it was like all these things kind of opened up. And it was like the block was lifted as I sent the galleys off to Penguin. And it was that like immediate. Like I hit send and I was like, oh my gosh, let's go buy this. And I'm gonna go write my father a handwritten letter and mail it. Like it was very dramatic, which doesn't mean everything's resolved, but it was like something was lifted.
Beautiful. Unfortunately, we have come to the conclusion of our talk. If you have any more questions, I'm sure they would love to hear them if you can just approach them and ask them. Thank you so much for being here with us today. I'd like to mention that we will be having a poetry night filled with 14 performers taking on the stage at 7 p.m. in Al-Baraha 3. That's the room right next to us. Tonight, yes, at 7 p.m. So I hope all of you join us, and thank you so much for being here with us tonight.
Thank you, Jamil. Thank you, Jamil.